All right, so here's where I left off from last time. I'm going to turn off this. I made some very minor changes to my slow in, slow outs on the top of my arcs here. I was pretty happy with my spacing as it gained speed to the ground and the squash, and then slow down and add a little bit more overlapping places here. In fact, right here, I think I see a change I can make and just slightly move this up. Make sure that it is, in fact, at the top of its arc. That makes for a good, nice, smooth movement. And so I was happy with the way that looked. Overlapping frames up here looks really good to emphasize slow in, slow out. Stretchy and spaced out areas here to emphasize the speed and impact as it hit. Now this looks ridiculous like that, one frame at a time. But again, replay what you have, and you'll see that there's some exaggeration happening there, but it's something that we can get away with in animation. Now, what I'm going to do is lock this down, all right, and I'm going to create a new layer to add a little bit more depth to my scene and also to introduce some other techniques and tools. I'm going to create a shadow layer and hit enter. And the shadow layer is going to be below the ball, so I'm going to slide that down right here. And what I'm going to do is, as a shadow, properties of a shadow go, I'm going to start my shadow maybe right about, as things go up higher, shadows don't need to really be present much. But as things come down closer to the ground, what I'm going to do is actually start on this frame. As things come closer to the ground, you're going to start to see a shadow starting to define itself. And we're going to make that happen here. So I'm going to use, first, I'm going to reset my tool here. And I'm going to make sure I choose black. And in your case, black is going to be chosen. And right now my alpha is all the way up. And what alpha does is control the transparency. So you can see that happening here. My fill color is showing a little bit transparent through the color there. So that's 80%, here's 63%, and so on. You can make it completely transparent. I'm going to raise it up to 100% for now, and I'm going to use my oval tool. Now, something to check on with your oval tool is that I don't need a stroke. Now, an oval tool will do both fill and stroke. Your fill should be set to the same as this over here, your fill color. Your stroke should be the same here. In this case, you can click on your stroke and make it non-existent and just hit the red stripe right here. That means no stroke is going to be added. Now I'm going to draw my shadow on the ground line here. So this is where I want my shadow line to follow. So this kind of has dual purpose for guiding my path as well as my shadow here. So I'm going to make sure my shadow stays on the good path. I'm going to draw this out. Now as things are higher up, your shadow is going to be a lot wider, right? Not as defined. And I'm going to use my select tool and put it right there on, oops, don't mean to grab that, put it right here on top of this. I'm going to turn this into a symbol. So like we did with the ball, I'm going to right click on it and convert to symbol. And I'm going to say, hey, you are now shadow. Keep it as a movie clip and okay. So I can see here that my shadow is now a symbol. I can also, now that it is an object and a symbol, I have different color effects available to me, different blending effects, different filters that I can use as well. So one of the first things I'm going to do is fade this out, which means I want to add a blur to it. So I'm going to go to my filters and I'm going to add a filter. And this shows up in your properties panel. Filters, plus sign, I'm going to add a blur. So if I zoom in here, I'll see that a blur was added just like that. I also want to kind of see where my ball is too. So we'll say at this height of the ball is when my filter is going to, or my shadow is going to start to show. Now I can affect the blur on that shadow as well. And in fact, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to lock it, the blur X and blur Y axis. So I'm going to crank this up, because as it's up higher, I want it to be blurrier, not as defined as things are in life. So also what I want to do is take a look at that, and I want to fade this out. That's really dark for a shadow. So I'm going to open up this symbol, and I'm going to double click on it. So now I know I'm in my shadow layer, and what I'm going to do is change the fill color and fade it out a little bit. And so now it's a little bit lighter than it was before. So I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to make sure that my color is selected. Change this to maybe 50%, because shadows are not opaque, right? So that looks probably pretty good to me. And I'm going to go back out to my scene. It's pretty well faded there. So what I'm going to do is tone down my blurriness just a tad. That looks like a good shadow to me. All right, so that is there on that frame. It's actually showing up on frame 1, but my shadow doesn't line up with my ball. What I want to do is line it up with this frame. So I have it here, and I want it on frame 5. So I'm going to click on it here, and I'm actually just going to move it over to frame 5. There's no shadow before it now, and then there's shadow here. And then what I'm going to do is follow this ball right along its path. So I'm going to hit F6, select the shadow, move it over. My onion skin is off. Now it is. And so I don't want to see my previous shadows. It's just going to mess me up. So now I'm going to do some transforming again. So I'm going to hit Q on my keyboard and make this narrower as the ball gets closer. I'm going to narrow it to better match the shape of this ball. And then what I might do is lock this again and maybe put a little bit less blur on it. And then here, next frame, F6, slide it over. Maybe narrow a little bit, lock it, less blur, F6. Maybe this one I can just kind of keep pretty much the same. Next one, F6. This one definitely needs to change to better match the shape of the ball. So I'm going to center it, stretch it out, raise it up a little bit, and lock this blur down and less, maybe about 2. Not completely 0, but just a little bit there. So as I go along, I'm just going to kind of match things up. I'll hit F6 and alter this shadow as I see fit. So this is here. I'm trying to make sure that my shadow is staying along the line so it's not bouncing up and down like the ball, because the shadow should remain on a solid flat plane. Lock this, increase it a bit. Another option that you can do is I can go to my next frame here. But you know what? I have a ball or a shadow that already looks like that. That would be over here possibly. So if I wanted to, I can take the shadow from this, copy it, go here, paste it, and just slide it over where it needs to go. Boom. And just tweak it a little bit. So I don't have to like reinvent the wheel here. I can do copy from what I've already done and just kind of trace the actions of your ball here. So making sure everything is matching up. This one here, F6 on that, bring it over, F6 on the next frame. Now it's getting closer to the ground, a little bit wider, so I'm going to widen it. I'm going to lock this and do a little bit more altering. Some of these are going to require a little bit more customizing. F6 again, take this, stretch it, maybe raise it up so it's not right there. Back down to 2 since it's on the ground. F6. Here's another case where I can alter this or copy from another one. So if I undo that, I can go to my next frame, or actually I can go to the previous frame, copy this one, go to the next frame, and paste that frame, and just slide it over. Okay, so it depends on what you're comfortable with doing. Maybe it needs a little bit more squeezing, and hand tool, move things over. I'm just going to kind of complete this all the way across. And as you preview it, check your work. I'm going to check my shadowed frames here, and I'll play it, see what it looks like. Oops, I got to pause it first. See how this plays through. Looks pretty good. Let's do, that's where I ended, so that's where it stops. So that shadow looks pretty good. I like the way it looks. Moves right along flat. I'm going to continue this through the rest of the animation here. And as I get towards the end, I will have, the shadow movements are going to be a lot closer together and a little bit more defined and not as blurry since it's closer to the ground. So I'll let you guys get to it, complete this, and we'll move on to some final steps here. All right, see you next time.